In London, Queen Elizabeth was also worried. She had heard no news of the Armada since it left Spain. It could arrive on English shores at any moment. Finally, at the end of June, the anxious Queen received a report from her spies. The Armada was dispersed in the northern Spanish ports and in appalling condition. Elizabeth summoned her two leading naval commanders, the aristocratic Protestant Lord Howard of Effingham, a 60-year-old veteran from an illustrious line of admirals, and England's most daring and brilliant naval captain and the terror of Spain, Sir Francis Drake. The English admirals had 90 ships stationed at Plymouth. They hoped to intercept the more powerful Spanish galleons and break up their formation before the Armada could meet up with the army. In reserve, 30 more English ships were stationed at the Downs to prevent the army's invasion from France. The flamboyant Drake proposed an offensive strategy against the Spanish. He wanted to hit the Armada while it was still recovering from the storms in northern Spain. The sooner we are gone, the better, Drake argued. Elizabeth was critical of the plan. Why risk the fleet? If Drake was delayed by weather or his fleet destroyed, England would be wide open to invasion. No, Drake should wait. It was better to send scouts to look for the Armada. On the same day that the scouts left Plymouth, Sidonia's flagship, the San Martin, led the Armada out of La Coruña harbour. By now, all his ships had come back, repairs had been made, supplies restored. Now the wind was at his back, and his spirits were up. Sidonia shouted, "Forward in God's name!" 12 days later, the Armada was sighted near Plymouth. As beacon fires lit up the English coastline, Sir Francis Drake was near Plymouth, playing a game of bowls. The Armada was now only 30 miles away, but Drake calmly declared, "We have time to finish the game and beat the Spaniards afterwards." By midday on July the 31st, after waiting anxiously for the tide to turn, the English sailed 40 ships out of Plymouth harbour. 2 hours later, they had managed to slip behind the Spanish formation. As a formal declaration of war, Lord Howard ordered his flagship Disdain to fire a solitary shot into the Armada's midst. In response, Duke Medina hoisted the royal banner on the mainmast of the San Martin. The battle for England had begun. In their tight formation, the Spanish ships were almost untouchable. Howard and Drake planned to use their more maneuverable fleet to cut out and overwhelm the Spanish ships one by one. "Let us pluck out their feathers," Drake said. Little by little. The first skirmish lasted for 4 hours. Subsided and the smoke cleared, English hopes sank. The Armada was intact. Sidonia was on the verge of doing what no man had done since William the Conqueror 500 years before. invade England. As long as he could keep his formation intact, England would be Spanish by the end of the year. Just as planned, early on Saturday morning, August the 6th, Sidonia sighted the French coast. By midday, the Armada had anchored at the port of Calais, but the port was empty. All that was waiting for Sidonia was a messenger. The Spanish army was still 2 weeks away. Sidonia was now a sitting duck. Food was running low, and the ammunition was almost gone. "I am anchored here," he wrote, "with the enemy's feet on my flank. They can cannonade me whenever they like, and I shall be unable to do much harm in return." Aboard the English flagship, Lord Howard and Sir Francis Drake grew worried. They had no idea the Spanish army had not arrived. Now might be their last chance to stop the Great Armada. But how? After hours of heated debate, Drake came up with a daring solution. He leaned over the meeting table and pounded his fist in excitement. "Fireships," he shouted. "We'll send in fireships." Stripped of crews, but with cannons loaded and decks ablaze, the fireship was the deadliest weapon of its day. Once the flames reached the guns, this floating bomb would explode, spreading fire a mile around. The Spanish called them hell burners. There was nothing Sidonia feared more. Fireships could destroy an entire navy in one blow. At midnight on Sunday, August the 7th, Sidonia's war council was interrupted by shouts from the deck of the San Martin. 8 glowing vessels were drifting with the wind and current straight towards them. For the first time since the Armada left Spain, discipline broke down. Captains cut their anchor cables and fled. The fireships had broken up the Spanish formation. Now, each ship could be picked off one by one. The next morning, the invincible Armada was scattered all along the French coast. Sidonia was virtually alone. At first light, Sidonia turned his San Martin into the wind. With a meager force of 5 ships, he prepared to engage the entire English fleet. The English moved in for the kill. This was the moment Drake had been waiting for. He targeted the San Martin, and the Battle of Gravelines began, the bloodiest and longest action of the entire campaign. Drake's flagship, the Revenge, swept down on the San Martin and opened fire at point-blank range. 140 more English warships followed to finish off the job, pouring over 500 rounds into the San Martin. One survivor noted, "She was a thing to see, riddled with shot like a sieve." The ship was so enveloped in gunsmoke that one Spaniard said, "For more than an hour we could not see." The Duke himself was wounded in the leg, but stayed on deck. He refused to give in. Better to die in battle than to be drowned without a fight. All day long his fleet drifted back to try and reform, and all day long the English picked them off. The Battle of Gravelines turned into an orgy of killing, a last-ditch effort to finish off the Armada once and for all. Around 6 p.m, a storm broke, and the fighting stopped. Both sides took stock. The English had lost 60 men and not a single ship. For the Spanish, it was a disaster. 4,000 men were killed, another 4,000 wounded. blood flowed across the decks like seawater. With the enemy blocking his retreat, Sidonia gave the order for his crippled fleet to take the long way home, around the British Isles. Fevered and semi-conscious, Sidonia took to his bunk and stayed there. The Spanish challenge vanished into the mist. The invincible armada was vanquished.